Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to start our new chapter, which is Center of Mass and Rotational Motion. Before studying different concept about this chapter, let us have an introduction. You know that till now we have discussed about the uniform motion, projectile motion, and in every case we have considered the body to be very small in size, which is known as point mass bodies. Point mass bodies, right? And in that case we are applying forces on that body and calculating different and doing different calculations. But what about if we are having a finite size body? In that case, where to apply the forces and what would be the effect of applying forces? So all these we will study in this chapter. So before studying, we will discuss about the type of bodies. Firstly is key, in that case when we are going to study about center mass, we need a finite size body, and for convenience we take a rigid body. Now what is rigid body? Rigid means hard. We know that as a layman language, rigid means hard bodies. Okay, means that bodies in which if we consider the different particles of the system are fixed at their position. For example, if we are having a block of iron or block of wood, in that case we are having these solid bodies. Okay, and in that case if we talk about the different particles of the system, they will be in different positions but fixed position, right? In that case when we apply forces, we can't apply on a single point mass body. Forces we can't be applied. So in that case the concept of center of mass will come, that we will discuss later. So first point is what kind of body we need to understand the chapter is rigid bodies. Second terms that we need to understand is system, internal forces and external forces. Okay, now what are these three terms? Actually in this chapter we are going to use these terms frequently, so before starting we should understand what are these. Now what do you understand by system? System means a collection of particles. Okay, for example, when we are talking about a classroom, in that classroom is a system, right? System which works properly. We have exams, we are having result procedure, everything is there, and in that case we can assume that the students are acting as a part of the system. Okay, so system can be considered as that body in which which is made up of different particles which can perform different functions, right? Now what are internal forces? Internal forces are the forces which are exerted by individual particles on each other. This could be understand, for example, we have a bag. Okay, we have a bag which is having objects which are moving. For example, we have toys which can move. Okay, with keys, जैसे हमारे फ्रिक्शन टॉयज होते हैं, ये कीज वाले टॉयज होते हैं, in that case they can move. Now if we switch it on, in that case every toy tends to move. Okay, and they will tend to exert forces on each other, and such forces which are being exerted by individual particles of the system on each other are known as internal forces. And what are external forces? External forces are the forces which are exerted on the system from the outside. Suppose now if I take this bag and I keep it from one position to another, it means I have applied a force externally on the system. So that kind of force which brings any change in state, direction, motion or any position of the object are known as external forces, right? Now we will study about the kinds of motion which a rigid body can have. Types of motion of a rigid body. A body may have three kinds of motion. The first one is translational motion. Another one, a body can have rotational motion. And third is translational as well as rotational motion. Okay, now let us understand these three types of motion one by one. First one is translational motion. Translational motion means in which every particle of the body is having the same velocity. Okay, for example, if we are having this inclined plane and this block is lying over it and this block is sliding, only sliding motion is considered to be translation. Kyun? Because in that case the body is moving in a linear path. So if we assume any two particles, 1 and 2, this is P1 and this is suppose P2. So every particle will be moving with the velocity with which this block is sliding. So in that case, such kind of motion is known as translational motion. Second one is rotational motion. Rotational motion. Now what is that? Rotational motion means in which body, suppose this is an irregular body and it is rotating about its own axis. Like suppose this is a pen, this is a rigid body and it is rotating like that. Okay, so such kind of motion, rotating at its own position about an axis, and such kind of motion is known as rotational motion. Now in this case, each particle, suppose there are two particles, 3 and 4 and 5 particles. Okay, so each particle is having its own radius, and let me take it further, that this is R2, this is R3, this is R4, and this is R5, and so on. So since every particle is having its own radius, so when the body is rotating, in that case by the formula V is equal to R omega, since R is different, so it means linear velocity for each particle will be different. So we can say that during the rotational motion, the linear velocity of each particle is different, right? And what about the angular velocity? Now angular velocity is given by theta by t, right? Angle, it depends upon angle. So in the every case you can have that if body is rotating, then in time t every particle will cover angle 2 pi for the complete rotation, if we say. So it means angular velocity for each and every particle is same. So this is very important fact about the rotational motion, that linear velocity that we will be using in our next topics also. The linear velocity of each particle will be different, while the angular velocity will be same for each particle during the rotational motion. Now let us discuss about the third kind of motion. The third kind of motion is translational as well as rotational motion. Now what is that? In this case, the particle, suppose this is inclined plane and this is a rigid body which is moving downward by rotating, मतलब वो rotate भी कर रहा है and that is moving forward also in a downward direction. So in that case it will be having translational motion also, and as well as about its own axis it is rotating also. So such kind of motion is known as translational as well as rotational motion.